Before we get started, I just want to let you know about a couple upcoming programs. First, we have our 2025 Community Day Symposium, Awakening Mythic Wisdom for Individual and Community Renewal, with Robert Tyminski, Laura Monchot, and Diane Sherwood, all Jungian analysts. And if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you might remember a recent episode with Robert Tyminski. And so he's going to be joining us for our Community Day. It's on March 8th at Loyola University, and it will be recorded. So if you can't make it in person, you'll be able to purchase the video after it's been edited. Also, we have a short webinar series, Facing Uncertainty, a depth psychological perspective on manipulation and conspiracy theories during turbulent times, with Vlado Schultz, Jungian analyst, on February 27th and March 6th. For more information, visit our website, jungchicago.org. Thanks.
Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of Jungian Ever After, a podcast about myths and fairy tales through the lens of Jungian analysis. I am your host, Reza, and joining me as always is my co-host and Jungian analyst, Dr. Adina Davidson. Today we set aside the heroics and epic feats of athleticism and turn to a more intimate story of romance. It is perhaps the most essential of love stories because it involves the god of love himself falling for a beautiful young woman against the will of Aphrodite.
In this episode, we're going to be looking at the myth of Eros and Psyche, a story of psychological development through love and through the conscious suffering of that love. Psyche is Greek for soul, or the animating spirit of the human body, or other living beings. In this myth, we'll watch Psyche transform from the animating spirit of all living beings into transcendent soul through falling in love, wounding her love, and consciously enduring sorrows and tests to reunite with her love. Eros, love, also transforms in a similar process.
I want to add that this was a story that you absolutely wanted to make sure that we included, and I was hoping you could just kind of elaborate on why. What is it about this story that is so important to you?
I see it as a story that describes some of the foundational ways that human beings become better, become more. Hercules described the archetypal pattern of human beings staying stuck. And that's important, but this is how we grow our souls. And that is the central Jungian project right there, growing our souls.
Yeah, in many ways, it's the opposite of Hercules.
It is, yes. And the opposite of the next myth that we're going to do, which is Narcissus.
Mm-hmm.
Opposites in different ways, but...
Well, without further ado, let us jump into the story of Eros and Psyche, or if you are coming from the Edith Hamilton mythology, Cupid and Psyche.
There was once a king who had 3 daughters, all lovely maidens, but the youngest, Psyche, excelled her sisters so greatly that beside them she seemed a very goddess consorting with mere mortals. The fame of her surpassing beauty spread over the earth, and everywhere men journeyed to gaze upon her with wonder and adoration, to do her homage as though she were in truth one of the immortals. They would even say that Venus herself could not equal this mortal. As they thronged in ever-growing numbers to worship her loveliness, no one any more gave a thought to Venus herself. Her temples were neglected, her altars foul with cold ashes, her favorite towns deserted and falling in ruins. All the honors once hers were now given to a mere girl destined some day to die. It may well be believed that the goddess would not put up with this treatment. As always, when she was in trouble, she turned for help to her son, that beautiful winged youth whom some call Cupid and others love, against whose arrows there is no defense, neither in heaven nor on earth. She told him her wrongs, and as always, he was ready to do her bidding. "Use your power," she said, "and make the hussy fall madly in love with the vilest and most despicable creature there is in the whole world." And so no doubt he would have done, if Venus had not first shown him Psyche, never thinking, in her jealous rage, what such beauty might do even to the god of love himself. As he looked upon her, it was as if he had shot one of his arrows into his own heart. He said nothing to his mother. Indeed, he had no power to utter a word, and Venus left him with the happy confidence that he would swiftly bring about Psyche's ruin. What happened, however, was not what she had counted on. Psyche did not fall in love with the horrible wretch. She did not fall in love at all. Still more strange, no one fell in love with her. Men were content to look and wonder and worship, and then pass on to marry someone else. Both her sisters, inexpressively inferior to her, were splendidly married, each to a king. Psyche, the all-beautiful, sat sad and solitary, only admired, never loved. It seemed that no man wanted her. This was, of course, most disturbing to her parents. Her father finally traveled to an oracle of Apollo to ask his advice on how to get her a good husband. The god answered him, but his words were terrible. Cupid had told him the whole story and had begged for his help. Accordingly, Apollo said that Psyche, dressed in deepest mourning, must be set on the summit of a rocky hill and left alone, and that there her destined husband, a fearful winged serpent, stronger than the gods themselves, would come to her and make her his wife. The misery of all when Psyche's father brought back this lamentable news can be imagined. They dressed the maiden as though for her death, and carried her to the hill with greater sorrowing than if it had been her tomb. But Psyche herself kept her courage. "You should have wept for me before," she told them, "because of the beauty that has drawn down upon me the jealousy of heaven. Now go, knowing that I am glad the end has come." They went in despairing grief, leaving the lovely helpless creature to meet her doom alone. And they shut themselves in their palace to mourn all their days for her. On the high hilltop in the darkness Psyche sat, waiting for she knew not what terror. There, as she wept and trembled, a soft breath of air came through the stillness to her, the gentle breathing of Zephyr, sweetest and mildest of winds. She felt it lift her up. She was floating away from the rocky hill and down until she lay upon a grassy meadow, soft as a bed and fragrant with flowers. It was so peaceful there. All her trouble left her, and she slept. She woke beside a bright river, and on its bank was a mansion stately and beautiful as though built for a god, with pillars of gold and walls of silver, and floors inlaid with precious stones. No sound was to be heard. The place seemed deserted, and Psyche drew near, awestruck at the sight of such splendor. As she hesitated on the threshold, voices sounded in her ear. She could see no one, but the words they spoke came clearly to her. The house was for her, they told her. She must enter without fear and bathe and refresh herself. Then a banquet table would be spread for her. "We are your servants," the voices said, "ready to do whatever you desire." The bath was the most delightful, the food the most delicious she had ever enjoyed. While she dined, sweet music breathed around her. A great choir seemed to sing to a harp, but she could only hear, not see them. Throughout the day, except for the strange companionship of the voices, she was alone, but in some inexplicable way, she felt sure that with the coming of the night, her husband would be with her, and so it happened. When she felt him beside her and heard his voice softly murmuring in her ear, All her fears left her. She knew without seeing him that there was no monster or shape of terror, but the lover and husband she had longed and waited for. This half-and-half companionship could not fully content her. Still, she was happy, and the time passed swiftly. One night, however, her dear though unseen husband spoke gravely to her, and warned her that danger in the shape of her two sisters was approaching. "They are coming to the hill where you disappeared, to weep for you," he said. "But you must not let them see you, or you will bring great sorrow upon me, and ruin to yourself." She promised him she would not, but all the next day she passed in weeping, thinking of her sisters and herself unable to comfort them. She was still in tears when her husband came, and even his caresses could not check them. At last he yielded sorrowfully to her great desire. "Do what you will," he said, "but you are seeking your own destruction." Then he warned her solemnly not to be persuaded by anyone to try to see him, on pain of being separated from him forever. Psyche cried out she would never do so. She would die 100 times over rather than live without him. "But give me this joy," she said, "to see my sisters." Sadly, he promised her that it should be so. The next morning the two came, brought down from the mountain by Zephyr. Happy and excited, Psyche was waiting for them. It was long before the three could speak to each other. Their joy was too great to be expressed except by tears and embraces. But when at last they entered the palace, and the elder sisters saw its surpassing treasures, when they sat at the rich banquet and heard the marvelous music, bitter envy took possession of them, and a devouring curiosity as to who was the lord of all this magnificence and their sister's husband. But Psyche kept faith. She told them only that he was a young man, away now on a hunting expedition. Then, filling their hands with gold and jewels, she had Zephyr bear them back to the hill. They went willingly enough, but their hearts were on fire with jealousy. All their own wealth and good fortune seemed to them as nothing compared with Psyche's, and their envious anger so worked in them that they came finally to plotting how to ruin her. That very night Psyche's husband warned her once more. She would not listen when he begged her not to let them come again. She never could see him, she reminded him. Was she also to be forbidden to see all others, even her sisters so dear to her? He yielded as before, and very soon the two wicked women arrived, with their plot carefully worked out. Already, because of Psyche's stumbling and contradictory answers when they asked her what her husband looked like, they had become convinced that she had never set eyes on him, and did not really know what he was. They did not tell her this, but they reproached her for hiding her terrible state from them, her own sisters. They had learned, they said, and knew for a fact that her husband was not a man, but the fearful serpent Apollo's oracle had declared he would be. He was kind now, no doubt, but he would certainly turn upon her some night and devour her. Psyche, aghast, felt terror flooding her heart instead of love. She had wondered so often why he would never let her see him. There must be some dreadful reason. What did she really know about him? If he was not horrible to look at, then he was cruel to forbid her ever to behold him. In extreme misery, faltering and stammering, she gave her sisters to understand that she could not deny what they said, because she had been with him only in the dark. "There must be something very wrong," she sobbed, "for him to shun the light of day." And she begged them to advise her. They had their advice all prepared beforehand. That night she must hide a sharp knife and a lamp near her bed. When her husband was fast asleep, she must leave the bed, light the lamp, and get the knife. She must steel herself to plunge it swiftly into the body of the frightful being the light would certainly show her. "We will be near," they said, "and carry you away with us when he is dead." Then they left her torn by doubt and distracted with what to do. She loved him. He was her dear husband. No, he was a horrible serpent, and she loathed him. She would kill him. She would not. She must have certainty. She did not want certainty. So all day long her thoughts fought with each other. When evening came, however, She had given the struggle up. One thing she was determined to do. She would see him. When at last he lay sleeping quietly, she summoned all her courage and lit the lamp. She tiptoed to the bed, and holding the light high above her, she gazed at what lay there. Oh, the relief and the rapture that filled her heart! No monster was revealed, but the sweetest and fairest of all creatures, at whose sight the very lamp seemed to shine brighter. In her first shame at her folly and lack of faith, Psyche fell on her knees and would have plunged the knife into her own breast if it had not fallen from her trembling hands. But those same unsteady hands that saved her betrayed her too, for as she hung over him, ravished at the sight of him, and unable to deny herself the bliss of filling her eyes with his beauty, some hot oil fell from the lamp upon his shoulder. He started awake. He saw the light and knew her faithlessness, and without a word, he fled from her. She rushed out after him into the night. She could not see him, but she heard his voice speaking to her. He told her who he was, and sadly bade her farewell. "Love cannot live where there is no trust," he said, and flew away. The god of love, she thought. He was my husband, and I, wretch that I am, could not keep faith with him. Is he gone from me forever? At any rate, she told herself with rising courage, I can spend the rest of my life searching for him. If he has no more love left for me, at least I can show him how much I love him. And she started on her journey. She had no idea where to go. She knew only that she would never give up looking for him. He, meanwhile, had gone to his mother's chamber to have his wound cared for. But when Venus heard his story and learned that it was Psyche whom he had chosen, she left him angrily alone in his pain, and went forth to find the girl of whom he had made her still more jealous. Venus was determined to show Psyche what it meant to draw down the displeasure of a goddess. Poor Psyche, in her despairing wanderings, was trying to win the gods over to her side. She offered ardent prayers to them perpetually, but not one of them would do anything to make Venus their enemy. At last she perceived that there was no hope for her, either in heaven or on earth, and she took a desperate resolve. She would go straight to Venus. She would offer herself humbly to her as her servant, and try to soften her anger. And who knows, she thought, if he himself is not there in his mother's house? So she set forth to find the goddess who was looking everywhere for her. When she came into Venus's presence, the goddess laughed aloud and asked her scornfully if she was seeking a husband, since the one she had had would have nothing to do with her, because he had almost died of the burning wound she had given him. But really, she said, you are so plain and ill-favored a girl that you will never be able to get you a lover, except by the most diligent and painful service. I will therefore show my goodwill to you by training you in such ways. With that she took a great quantity of the smallest of the seeds, wheat and poppy and millet and so on, and mixed them all together in a heap. By nightfall these must all be sorted, she said. See to it for your own sake. And with that she departed. Psyche, left alone, sat still and stared at the heap. Her mind was all in a maze because of the cruelty of the command, and, indeed, it was of no use to start a task so manifestly impossible. But at this direful moment, she who had awakened no compassion in mortals or immortals, was pitied by the tiniest creatures of the field, the little ants, the swift runners. They cried to each other, Come, have mercy on this poor maid, and help her diligently. At once they came, waves of them, one after another, and they labored separating and dividing until what had been a confusing mass lay all ordered, every seed with its kind. This was what Venus found when she came back, and very angry she was to see it. Your work is by no means over, she said. Then she gave Psyche a crust of bread and bade her sleep on the ground while she herself went off to her soft, fragrant couch. Surely, if she could keep the girl at hard labor and half starve her too, that hateful beauty of hers would soon be lost. Until then, she must see that her son was securely guarded in his chamber, where he was still suffering from his wound. Venus was pleased at the way matters were shaping. The next morning, she devised another task for Psyche. This time, a dangerous one. "Down there, near the river bank," she said, "where the brushes grow thick, are sheep with fleeces of gold. Go fetch me some of their shining wool." When the worn girl reached the gently flowing stream, a great longing seized her to throw herself into it and end all her pain and despair. But as she was bending over the water, she heard a little voice from near her feet, and looking down, saw that it came from a green reed. She must not drown herself, it said. Things were not as bad as that. The sheep were indeed very fierce, but if Psyche would wait until they came out of the bushes toward evening to rest beside the river, she could go into the thicket and find plenty of the golden wool hanging on the sharp briars. So spoke the kind and gentle reed, and Psyche, following the directions, was able to carry back to her cruel mistress a quantity of the shining fleece. Venus received it with an evil smile. "Someone helped you," she said sharply. "Never did you do this by yourself. However, I will give you an opportunity to prove that you really have the stout heart and the singular prudence you make such a show of. Do you see that black water which falls from the hill yonder? It is the source of the terrible river which is called the River Styx. You are to fill this flask from it." That was the worst task yet, as Psyche saw when she approached the waterfall. Only a winged creature could reach it, so steep and slimy were the rocks on all sides, and so fearful the onrush of the descending waters. But by this time it must be evident to all the readers of this story, as perhaps deep in her heart it had become evident to Psyche herself, that although each of her trials seemed impossibly hard, an excellent way out would always be provided for her. This time her savior was an eagle, who poised on his great wings beside her, seized the flask from her with his beak, and brought it back to her full of the black water. But Venus kept on. One cannot but accuse her of some stupidity. The only effect of all that had happened was to make her try again. She gave Psyche a box which she was to carry to the underworld and ask Proserpine to fill with some of her beauty. She was to tell her that Venus really needed it. She was so worn out from nursing her sick son. Obediently, as always, Psyche went forth to look for the road to Hades. She found her guide in a tower she passed. It gave her careful directions how to get to Proserpine's palace. First through a great hole in the earth, then down to the river of death, where she must give the ferryman, Charon, a penny to take her across. From there the road led straight to the palace. Cerberus, the three-headed dog, guarded the doors, but if she gave him a cake, he would be friendly and let her pass. All happened, of course, as the tower had foretold. Proserpine was willing to do Venus a service, and Psyche, greatly encouraged, bore back the box, returning far more quickly than she had gone down. Her next trial she brought upon herself, through her curiosity and still more her vanity. She felt that she must see what that beauty charm in the box was, and perhaps use a little of it herself. She knew quite as well as Venus did that her looks were not improved by what she had gone through, and always in her mind was the thought that she might suddenly meet Cupid. If only she could make herself more lovely for him. She was unable to resist the temptation. She opened the box. To her sharp disappointment, she saw nothing there. It seemed empty. Immediately, however, a deadly languor took possession of her, and she fell into a heavy sleep. At this juncture, the god of love himself stepped forward. Cupid was healed of his wound by now, and longing for Psyche. It is a difficult matter to keep love imprisoned. Venus had locked the door, but there were the windows. All Cupid had to do was to fly out and start looking for his wife. She was lying almost beside the palace, and he found her at once. In a moment he had wiped the sleep from her eyes and put it back into the box. Then, waking her with just a prick from one of his arrows, and scolding her a little for her curiosity, he bade her take Prosperine's box to his mother, and he assured her that all thereafter would be well. While the joyful Psyche hastened on her errand, the god flew up to Olympus. He wanted to make certain that Venus would give them no more trouble, so he went straight to Jupiter himself. The father of gods and men consented at once to all that Cupid asked. "Even though," he said, "you have done me great harm in the past, seriously injured my good name and my dignity by making me change myself into a bull and a swan and so on. However, I cannot refuse you." Then he called a full assembly of the gods and announced to all, including Venus, that Cupid and Psyche were formally married, and that he proposed to bestow immortality upon the bride. Mercury brought Psyche into the palace of the gods, and Jupiter himself gave her the ambrosia to taste, which made her immortal. This, of course, completely changed the situation. Venus could not object to a goddess for her daughter-in-law. The alliance had become eminently suitable. No doubt she reflected also that Psyche, living up in heaven with a husband and children to care for, could not be much on the earth to turn men's heads and interfere with her own worship. So all came to a most happy end. Love and the soul, for that is what Psyche means, had sought and, after sore trials, found each other, and that union could never be broken.
Such a beautiful story. A lot of my research for this episode from a lovely book called Alchemy of the Soul, The Eros and Psyche Myth as a Guide to Transformation by Martin Lowenthal. Lowenthal says, "We often feel, if only we can find our true love, while somehow avoiding the oceanic feelings and forces that terrify us, we will in some way solve the central problem of our lives. We will feel whole." This quote really brings me back to being a teenager or a very young woman yearning for love in just this way. I felt like I could not be physically, emotionally, or spiritually whole without love. There was like a chasm in me.
I have much of the same memories, especially in middle school. I mean, middle school is renowned as sort of a terrible time. People are going through puberty. You feel, terrible about your self-worth and all kinds of other things. There's just a lot of feelings all around.
The nadir of life.
Indeed. And I used to keep my laptop by the bed and watch these music videos of couples from anime or games and just fall asleep crying over my own loneliness. It was a thing at the time. People would take characters that they envisioned as couples from a show or games or whatever and put together a video to music of their choosing.
Sort of like fan fiction, but a video.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, I just would watch those and feel so sad over my own loneliness. I had a great family and everything, but I wanted romantic love.
We get to a point in development where all of the other kinds of love aren't enough. And it's like Psyche, like our soul knows that we need a partner in a different way than we've had. And until we find that or we make peace with not having it, we're going to feel unwhole. And that's terrible. Lowenthal points out that as we age, we may try to avoid the extremes of love, fear, grief, anger, and passion. And we're liable to settle into a secure, comfortable routine. I think both of us probably are in long-term relationships that secure, comfortable routine would probably describe a lot of the relationship, right? I've been married 37 years. You've been married 7?
Yeah, married 7 and then
together
dated for several before
300
that.
or 400 years. Yeah. So what Lowenthal says about this is we mistake the loving nature of the universe for a cuddly, warm embrace, forgetting that it is more truly embodied in the ferocious challenges that compel us to grow into nature, relationships, community, and uncompromising sacred.
Hearing that makes me feel like I age quickly or something. For a long time now, I've tried to avoid sort of extreme emotions. I remember hating when my parents raised their voices against each other, and I never wanted to have fights like that. I remember distinctly this one road trip where they were fighting, and I felt like their fighting made my sister cry, and I got really upset at them for it. So when I then was in my own relationships, or when I experienced hard things like the loss of my father when I was 15, I tried to really temper emotions because of the pain they could bring. But trying to contain emotions is, I think like trying to bottle a river, right? It's just impossible. I've been watching a show on Disney Plus, The Acolyte, which is in the Star Wars universe, and it's supposed to go into a little more of the dark side of the Force. But there's this Republic senator who calls the Jedi a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable. And the person he's talking to replies, "We don't control the Force." And he says, "No, not the Force, your emotions." And that's just really embodies this whole thing for me, because you're just nothing if you don't have emotions. And so it's funny that this organization, the Jedi, that people love and think is very cool, and they're almost monk-like, but they supposedly have a handle on their emotions, and it's just not true.
It's not possible, right? I think the analogy that you used, that it's like trying to bottle a river, is perfect. We can dam a river, we can divert a river, but we cannot change the amount of water there is, and eventually that water will find its path. I would argue that we can't control our emotions. We can control our behavior. We can control how we respond to our emotions. The myth of Eros and Psyche points to how profound love and insane challenges make up the ground of a fully lived life. Life will tend to hand us extremes, even if we try to avoid it. And it is through taking on the difficulties that we may come into our true nature. Deep encounters with Eros, the love that connects one human to another, inevitably leads to both pain and profound joy. This love can be between romantic life partners, it can be between parents and children, friends, comrades, even a general love of our communities. When we experience it honestly and authentically, and we don't try to bottle up our rivers, it's transformative.
My wife and I have often commented since the birth of our daughter that we love her so much, and we can't even imagine the pain we would feel if we lost her. Then, as an extension of that, to realize that this is how much our parents love us, it's kind of astonishing. We had no idea until we experienced that same depth of emotion ourselves.
I think that's true for everybody, or everybody who has a child. The birth of a child opens up places in your heart that you didn't even know existed, let alone know that they were closed. Mm-hmm. Living a comfortable life insulates us from suffering, sort of, but also from the capacity to make meaning of that suffering. In this myth, Psyche moves from personal soul to sacred soul. She moves from being served by others as a princess, so she has servants, to serving the divine, particularly Aphrodite, as part of her movement to being able to serve all of humanity. Although it's hard for me to understand, given Aphrodite's selfishness and random cruelty, why it's a good thing to serve her, but the myth seems to be saying it is.
I think there's just this expectation of serving the gods in general, and maybe she felt that if she served Aphrodite well, she could be less targeted by her.
That makes sense, but I don't know that this myth is trying to make sense. She is a human beauty. That is her kind of greatness. And Aphrodite is the divine beauty. That when we take our whatever gift we have as a human and use it to serve the divine, that's our transformative path.
Mm-hmm. It may just be part of that hero's journey, just like Hercules feeling guilty and doing the labors of Hercules. These were her labors that they don't get a great name for some reason, but the labors of Psyche that she does for Aphrodite, both to try and prove herself and win back Eros, but also because she feels guilty about what she did.
And the difference, as we pointed out in the intro, is that she changes and Hercules doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
She goes from a small personal soul to an eternal kind of world soul. Just on another topic, in some of the ancient myths, Eros was androgyne. They have qualities of both genders and contain the potential to generate all phenomena. Eros was one of the first beings created. They were born out of a spirit egg laid by night in the heart of darkness. Eros hatched from this egg, double-sexed, four-headed, and with wings of gold, which is quite an image. Their birth set the universe in motion. Creation of the universe was an act of love. This echoes through the rest of time. Relationships to parents, siblings, spouses, friends are the fabric of our existence. Every one of these relationships carries the specific genetic pattern of Eros that connects them to their source. Eros ignites the heat at the center of the universe and in our own inner beings.
I think some with that image of Eros might have believed it to be a monster, certainly. But I'm not sure we had that as part of our creation myth coverage earlier. Didn't seem to make the Edith Hamilton. But so I guess it's chaos creates night. Night creates love. And then love sparks the creation of the universe. Is that sort of where heaven and earth come in?
Exactly. Before Eros, there's sort of this undifferentiated prima materia in alchemical terms.
Primordial chaos
In biblical terms, yes. And then somehow out of that primordial chaos of night creates love, and that creates differentiation. Night and day, earth and water. I'm doing the biblical creation myth, but
and then that's where we enter in the Titans, right? Which is where our sort of creation myth that we covered.
Exactly. Once we've gotten to that place of there's differentiation. I'm going to move that to human psyche. We all have personal Eros in ourselves. We have the impulse to generate something new and to relate to others. This podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We always talk about, I don't get paid anything for it. It comes out of this creative impulse, this urge to bring something of ourselves, of our vision into the world and to relate to other people, to have other people hear it, see it, hopefully respond to it. We are driven to manifest, to create, and spin the threads that connect us to other humans, sentient beings, and the inanimate universe.
Yeah, I mean, that's why something like solitary confinement is so awful. We're just not cut out to live in isolation from everything.
Yeah, I think that's... I mean, I think most of us would probably rather die than live years and years and years alone.
I mean, even a hermit, right, living in the woods, you still have animals and nature. There's stuff.
Right, you're connecting to the created world. You're not in isolation. And I mean, Thoreau, right, the sort of hermit, actually had quite a bit of human contact if you study his life. So in addition to this personal Eros, there's a transpersonal Eros that connects the whole universe. The myth of Eros and Psyche starts out with a beautiful maiden being worshipped as if she were Aphrodite, and Aphrodite being ignored. I was kind of thinking, wow, we can sort of see Taylor Swift as a modern day Psyche, right? She is being worshipped in a way that might have been reserved for worship of the divine.
Maybe I see what you mean in terms of being loved and desired by everyone, but then struggling to actually find a partner. The difference where I don't think it quite fits, though, is that it's not as though she hasn't been dating. It's not as though she hasn't been trying. Psyche, no one even tries because she's just so unattainable. Taylor Swift, even now, she's in a relationship with Travis Kelce, so it's not for want of trying. Just
it doesn't
hasn't
fit
worked out
perfectly, but I wonder to what extent the way that she is worshipped gets in the way of her having real human relationships.
Well, and then there's also the whole, how do you, given she's straight, find a man who's willing to accept that this woman has so much more power than probably he will ever have.
I mean, that seems to be Travis Kelce's what's making it work. Is he's like, yeah, cool, great. A human being embodying the archetype is always dangerous. The Greeks were very wary of hubris, of human beings feeling like we are larger or more important than we are. Anytime a human starts to feel godlike or to be treated in a godlike way, if you're reading a Greek myth, disaster is around the corner. Do you think this holds true in the 21st century?
I think there are times when we certainly wish it did. It's not always going to happen in this karmic way like it does in the stories. There's plenty of times where we all think that someone really deserves to be taken down a notch, and it just doesn't happen.
Right. They just go on to one glorious success after another. Yeah, I think I agree with that. Aphrodite sends Eros to fix this shift of attention from herself to Psyche. She gives Eros the job of having Psyche fall in love with an outcast. At the same time, Psyche realizes that no one really loves her. Many worship her or gaze from afar, but no one wants to marry her, to really know her. She's very lonely. This rings very true to me in my role as a marriage counselor. It sometimes happens that a couple will come in because one spouse has the other so idealized that the other does not feel seen. Like for a long time in relationships, it can feel just lovely to be on a pedestal. To be idealized or seen as a goddess erases our ability to relate to others, and that becomes really apparent over time. You see me as this perfect being, but you're not seeing me as Herb, the ordinary guy. And we really want to be related to and to relate to others as fully human, as our ordinary, unique, individual selves. And so to be put on a pedestal becomes intolerably lonely.
I wonder how often is it the one being put on a pedestal feels the most troubled, or versus the one doing that feeling like they're unworthy. right? That's causing the trouble. I feel like it can go either way. And sometimes
I think it goes both.
May not even realize they're being put on a pedestal.
I think at the beginning of a relationship, neither partner realizes they're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Neither partner sees the one who's on the pedestal as like, oh, I am being loved. I am being treated so well. The one who is putting on a pedestal, the pedestal putter, it feels like, I've finally found the perfect man, woman, non-binary person. I finally found the perfect one for me.
Mm-hmm.
And all I have to do is adore them.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels great to everybody until, like, it doesn't anymore, until our ordinary humanness needs to come out. And the pedestal putter is irritated at the flaws of the pedestal and the one on the pedestal is lonely and unseen. And there's no real relationship. Oh, and the pedestal putter starts to feel one down and shame and all of that, which is inevitable if you are adoring somebody.
To bring it back to the story, I mean, there's definitely this unequal footing between Eros and Psyche beyond that of deity and mortal. I mean, she doesn't know that he's a deity, right? But just in that he has seen her but will not allow the reverse. From the story, I have to wonder where this rule of blind faith even came from. Was it something that Apollo instituted for his aid? I mean, my sort of read was that the palace and bringing her up was because Eros came to Apollo for help. So was that his help? I don't know. Or was it just a rule of Eros's as the god of love?
I have no idea the answer to it. I have no idea. I would say that for there to be real mature love, we need to truly see the other. So if this is a story about transformation and growth, it's starting off in a place where the conditions are one cannot see the other. Once Psyche sees Eros, she is assigned impossible seeming tasks by Aphrodite. She must sort seeds and grains, by the way, very much like Cinderella. And also like Cinderella, she's helped by tiny, unexpected helpers, in this case, ants. According to Jungian analyst James Hillman, insects are symbols of psychic energy. Small helpers come from unknown, unexpected places in Psyche. She also gets help with getting the fleece from the golden rams and help from Zeus's eagle to get water from the river that feeds the river Styx. These helpers solve problems that Psyche could not solve by herself. Again, this is often true in my psychoanalytic practice. People will come to me with a seemingly intractable problem. For example, I don't have the courage to leave this terrible situation, maybe a terrible work situation or a terrible marriage, and there's nothing that I can do. I will say to that analysand, you're right. There's nothing you can do right now except stay conscious of the truth. Tell yourself the truth, tell me the truth, even if you can't tell anyone else yet. Eventually, if you stay conscious, Psyche will offer you something unexpected and from an unknown place inside of you. You will have internal strength or wisdom that you cannot force. It just comes.
Not exactly the same because it's not dealing with, big relationship or emotional problems. But for me, what I think of the most is just sometimes working on a hard puzzle. I play some video games where there's puzzles, or just generally I like puzzles sometimes. And sometimes you need to take a step back from something very difficult like that you can't figure it out in the moment. And then upon returning after a good night's rest, a week, a month, whatever, however long, you might return and realize that the solution seems obvious, and you wonder how you missed it in the moment before.
I think that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's very funny to me, the difference between a feeling type, me, and a thinking type. I'm thinking about intractable emotional problems. Rasa's thinking about the solution to cognitive problems like a puzzle. But the process is identical. The process is looking really, really hard and clearly at a situation, accepting your stuckness, and just waiting for something else to emerge. The relationship between Psyche and Eros also brings up the issue of trust versus knowledge. For example, in my reading of Genesis and the story of the tree of knowledge, giving in to the temptation to know rather than blindly trusting God takes us out of the Garden of Eden, but it also makes us more fully human. As humans, we can't just trust. We must know. Curiosity is as much a basic human drive as hunger, sex, or death. Maybe more so.
Yeah, I, of course, am watching a little human who is constantly driven to explore and understand. And so for her, everything is new. So it's just this curiosity to put everything in her mouth to see if it's edible, to
climb everything.
Yep. Every climbable surface. Yeah. And unfortunately, her memory is not fully developed, so she will do the same thing over again because she maybe doesn't remember that she's already done that and had a negative experience. But some things she's starting to hold on to. But it's...
You can see the drive to understand, to know.
Yeah. It's clearly the number one thing going on with her is just exploring and trying to understand the world.
So our human need to know results in suffering. Might be the small suffering of falling off that stair that you've climbed on 3 times and fallen off 3 times, but you still got to do it. Or the archetypal suffering of Psyche. But it also leads to more full humanity. Before Psyche's betrayal of Eros, they only have sex. They only have the nighttime. There's no real knowledge of each other, no real relationship. This reminds me of a Buddhist Jungian analyst who's also a marriage counselor named Polly Young Eisendrath, who wrote a wonderful book called You're Not What I Expected. She says that real relationships start with disappointment. Before we are disappointed in each other, it's just projection. It's not real. And then we go, oh, you're not what I thought you were. If we're lucky and if we're honest and if we're brave, this disappointment leads us towards what she calls a friendly curiosity about the true nature of our beloved. And this mutual friendly curiosity, who are you? What are you thinking about? What's going on with you? Oh, you've changed your mind about that thing, or you've changed how you tell me more. That friendly curiosity gives us a vessel to mutually explore and understand ourselves and each other, which she argues is the goal of relationships.
I do feel like sometimes people take the change as cause for a negative response of, oh, you're not the person I thought you were, right?
Yeah, you're not what I expected. You're not the right one for me. She's going to say no one's the right one for anyone else. It's how we relate to each other. In Alchemy of the Soul, the author Martin Lowenthal argues that, according to the myth, your unique contribution to the whole comes not from what you are given, the beauty, royal birth, and fame that both Eros and Psyche have, but from the wounds you receive, the difficulties you confront, your surrender and service to what seems terrifying but is simply unknown to you. The myth says that we will fail in our most important endeavors, and our failures will be chances to be open to help, support, and connection.
So a phrase that comes up in fiction a lot is that failure is the greatest teacher. May not be those exact words, but variations. And if you always succeed, you may learn a few things along the way. But it's failure that makes us sit with ourselves and analyze what went wrong to prevent experiencing that failure again. And we tend to fail in our most important endeavors because they're often the hardest ones. So it may take some failure and persistence to finally achieve the desired outcome.
I think that's a very human living out of this myth. There's also this, just throwing it out there to our listeners, there's this very strange and puzzling section of this myth. It's the oracle scene. The oracle is the Pythia at Delphi. She is Apollo's oracle, voice of truth. But in the myth, she listens to Aphrodite, not Apollo, and her prophecy is wrong. Raisa and I are both stumped by this. So if you listeners have any ideas or interpretations or senses of what this might be symbolic of, let us know. Maybe put something in the Discord. We'd love to hear some interpretation of this strange moment in mythology.
Yeah, it was just one of these things that we both looked at it, read it, and we're like, what is going on here? Because we usually experience the oracles as they make these prophecies and they're self-fulfilling. It's almost because the person has heard this thing, they go and make it happen.
They might try to avoid it, but it's gonna happen.
But in this, it just seems like they're being used as a tool. This isn't...
They're not an oracle. They're whatever, a false prophet. Or we don't know.
Yeah.
We're baffled. So Raisa and I wanted to conclude with a very tiny segment from a play called Metamorphosis by Mary Zimmerman.
Yeah, this is near and dear to me and my wife because we were actually in this play when our high school decided to do it in our senior year, which was a bold undertaking because it involves a set piece that is basically a little pool of water that you have to build on the stage and, constantly keep at the right level and clean up after and stuff. So very, very cool to get to experience as one of the characters. And then later, I forget if it was for an anniversary or something, but we went and saw it performed at the Looking Glass Theater in Chicago, which I might be wrong on this, but I think was where it was first
performed. I think so too.
So, but this is from the Eros and Psyche section of Metamorphosis. The soul wanders in the dark until it finds love. And so, wherever our love goes, there we find our soul.
It always happens.
If we're lucky, and if we let ourselves be blind.
Instead of watching out?
Instead of always watching out. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Our intro-outro music is a sample of Seculos' Epitaph with the Lyre of Apollo by Lina Palera under an attribution non-commercial Share-alike 3.0 international license. You can find the full version at freemusicarchive.org, link in the description. And if you like what you've been hearing, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your podcast feed of choice, as it always helps other people find the show. The show will always be free and available to all, but if you would like to monetarily support the show, you can do so at ko-fi.com/JungianEverAfter. Also, Dr. Adina Davidson is a certified Jungian analyst who offers telesessions. You can find out more about her practice at adinadavidson.com or her Psychology Today profile. We'll be with you again next time, but until then, we hope your days are filled with exploring the worlds of imagination and storytelling.